What's up, guys? It is Ben with Ben's Election Predictions, and today we are going to get into an election prediction between Donald Trump and Joe Biden if the election were held today. We're really going to focus on this electoral map because, like I've been saying in a lot of my videos, the only things that are really going to matter are these 7 or 8 swing states. All the rest of the 42, 43 states have already been decided. And so the election is really going to come down to these 7 states. And as you can see right now, these toss-up states, neither candidate has that magic number of 270 to win the election without these 95 electoral votes in the toss-up states. So let's dive right in. So first, to let me just explain the likely state. So likely is this dark red or this dark blue, not the darkest red or the darkest blue, but kind of in the middle there. And those are states that I think will be between 5 and 12 percentage points. I do think that Alaska and Montana will kind of be on the higher end. So, maybe between 10 and 12 points. And I think Florida will just be right above that like 5 point mark to be around 5 or 6 points. As this is one state that's been trending a lot to the right. In terms of the Democratic states, so I do think that New Jersey and New Mexico are going to be likely Democratic states. In 2020 they weren't that competitive. But I do think that in 2024 they actually are going to swing right some. And also just to get us started, the betting odds do have this as a purely 50-50. And the reason why I'm not using Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, because if the election were held today, this is kind of what people are thinking. Obviously, the third party candidates have no chance, but the other forecasts, they have Joe Biden's actually being lower, and I think this is factoring in his health concerns, which are very real. But if the election were held today, obviously that wouldn't be as much of a factor. So moving on to the lean state. So Texas is a state that Donald Trump won by 6 points, and this isn't loading for me right now. In 2020, I do think it's going to be on the verge of being lean, and likely it'll probably be around 4 to 6 points. And I'm putting it in the lean category right now because I do think it will trend a little bit to the left just because of the Austin, Dallas, and Houston suburbs, which have been trending to the left. But the border is a major issue that has hurt Biden. So I would not be surprised if it actually stays fairly static. Um, Moving on to the lean Democrat states, this is actually going to be surprising for a lot of people because Virginia is a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points in 2020. But I actually do think it's going to be very similar to Texas, right in that 4 to 6 point range. There have been some very high quality polls that have this race as tied, or even Biden +1 or +2. I do think that's going to normalize to be around 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 points. But if the election were held today, I think it could be anywhere between 3 to 5 points. And same with Minnesota, similar polling there. And Joe Biden might improve, but I think it would be around 3, 4, or 5 points. I do think the polls are probably overestimating Republicans a little bit, but if the election were held today, I do think we're still under that 5 threshold. So, next up, we're going to, obviously these are toss-up states. Don't feel, as confident as all the colors that are on the board, but I do feel good enough about Georgia as being a lean Republican state. And this would be the first, pickup state that I'm showing for Donald Trump because he lost this state in 2020. I do think that was a little bit of a fluke. There was turnout through the absolute roof. And, some of those low propensity disengaged voters voted, the black turnout was super high. And in Georgia's state that where if you actually have high turnout, it's going to hurt the Republicans. So I actually think when we have lower turnout in 2024, which is very likely to be the case because turnout in 2020 was so high. It's probably going to be a little higher than 2016 just because there's more voting age population, but probably significantly dropping down from 2020. Next up, I'm going to the state of North Carolina. I think North Carolina and Georgia are actually going to be very similar. Obviously, Georgia was to the left of North Carolina in 2020. I'm actually not so sure that's going to be the case in 2024. I think North Carolina is going to be right on the borderline of being a tilt and lean Republican state. Well, I think Georgia will probably be around 2 to 3 points for Donald Trump. I think North Carolina, it's a little bit tougher. There's been a lot of people moving into the Research Triangle and the Charlotte suburbs and the Charlotte urban area. And so that's going to help the Democrats. But at the same time, um, I do think lower turnout, similar to Georgia, is actually going to help the Republicans. So I think while Georgia's maybe around 2.5 for Trump, North Carolina is maybe going to be around 2 points for Trump. All right, so now moving on to the lean Democrat states. I do still think Michigan is going to be a lean Democrat state. I think that Joe Biden is likely to win the state right around 2 points, kind of like North Carolina. I do think it could go either way, but if the election were held today, even though the polls have this at around even, if we look at some of the forecasts, while some of the forecasts have Pennsylvania and Michigan for going for Donald Trump, they do have Michigan to the left, and similar dynamic over here on 538 as well. Michigan is seen as being a little bit to the left of some of these other states, not by much. And this is because Joe Biden won the state by around 3 to 3.5 points in 2020, which was much more than Wisconsin, which was under 1 point, Pennsylvania, which was around 1 point. So next up, going to the tilt Republican states. And so I was debating a lot on whether to put Nevada in the tilt or lean category. The polls would suggest this is a lean state. So if the election were held today, obviously you have to put more, weight on the polls. But the fundamentals of the state, this is a state that's kind of been fool's gold for the Republicans, very similar to North Carolina for the Democrats. And the polls, consistently overstate Republican support here. So I feel fairly comfortable putting it in the tilt Republican category. I do think it'll probably be around 1 to 2 percentage points for the Republicans. If I had to put a number on it right now, I'd probably say 1.5 for Trump. Next up is the state of Arizona, which I actually think will be to the left of Nevada, which is, unlike 2020, it's the similar reason behind why I think that North Carolina will be to the left of Georgia. And I'm actually curious to see if it's interesting because the forecasts actually don't necessarily back this up. And this is probably because of the historical fundamentals of okay, so 538 has Nevada to the right of Arizona. In North Carolina at 61. Yeah, so this is my opinion, and 538 agrees with me. Decision Desk disagrees with me. But I think Arizona is a state that's trending leftward. It was significantly trending leftward, and I don't know if these New York Times tabs are going to open, but you even saw from 2008 to 2020, every election Arizona moved left. I do think that is going to stop in 2024. The border issues are a lot, but you also have a lot of people moving from California to the Phoenix suburbs too. So I do think the state's going to tilt Republican. I think Trump will probably win it by around between 0 and 1 percentage points, maybe around 0.5. So Arizona is really on a knife's edge here, and but we'll see. All right, next up, I'm going to the state of Pennsylvania, and I'm very conflicted here because, you know, if we look at the decision desk, this is a state that they have in Donald Trump's column. If we look at 538, they have it in Joe Biden's column. If we look at the polling here, which is interesting, Pennsylvania is actually to the right of both Michigan and Wisconsin. So this is actually a little bit flipped for what it was in 2020 because Wisconsin was the closest, Pennsylvania was the second closest, and Michigan was the third closest. And I am saying that if the election were held today, and so the average of these polls, might not be what you would suggest because you have to put more weight on the polls. But if you do look at kind of the quality of these polls, they're all within the margin of error, and Trump isn't getting to kind of that magic number of of 50. And so I do think these polls are understating Biden's support. Some you see Trump's support has remained constant here. And so I really think that, turnout will be lower. And I actually think it's going to have a net neutral effect. I do think there will be some Biden voters that actually do vote for Trump, but I just don't think it's enough to overcome that, 1.2 margin that Biden won by in 2020. And I really have this state as being a pure toss up right now. Um, like I think Biden wins this under 0.5 percentage points. I do think there would be an automatic recount triggered in the state of Pennsylvania. But that's where I have it right now. So next up is, going to the state of Wisconsin. And, I'm really, it's really hard to differentiate because these states are so close. Wisconsin is a state that elected a Democrat incumbent governor, but a Republican incumbent senator in Wisconsin, while Pennsylvania in the midterms, swung way left and has a very popular Democratic governor who I think will be on the campaign trail for Joe Biden, which is also why I think Pennsylvania will, maybe even Biden will widen his or eat into Trump's margin and might even lead him. But I think Wisconsin is a state that has consistently underestimated the support from Republicans. So this the fact that like this is basically tied right here. I don't put a lot of faith into these polls, and I think you just have to look at the past elections because there was a plus poll that had Biden up by plus 17 in 2020. And I think with the same candidates on the ballot and a lot of these pollsters not changing the way that they do the polls, I think you're more likely to see a big polling error in Wisconsin than in states like Michigan and Pennsylvania. And so, two things that I left off, which they aren't as relevant right now, because I did say that Donald Trump would go past the magic number of 270, are these congressional districts. I haven't done as much research into these, but it does seem like that Maine second congressional district probably will go red, and that Nebraska's second conditional district will probably go blue, both of these being lean margins. And the reason why these might be important is because if Joe Biden were to win Wisconsin, then this congressional district will be even more important. And if it's a tie, it'll go to the House, and currently the Republicans are in charge of the House. So, the tie would go to Donald Trump here, I think. But, these congressional districts will be important. So, let me kind of go back to what I had as my final thing. So I have Donald Trump at 278 and Joe Biden at 260. So could not be closer right now. And this is, pretty much, I would say, reflected in, what uh the different forecasters have. Um, I'm more aligned to the decision desk than the 538. But if the 538 was a nowcast, I think it would have Donald Trump being favored. And so that's for the purpose of this video. That's what I was doing. So please let me know what y'all think in the comments of my video here. If I underestimated Trump or Biden, I would love to get your feedback. And thank you all for everyone who's watching, and please subscribe to my videos as well. Thank you guys.